The chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff. Congressman Schiff, I want to ask you about the situation in Israel. Israel has a right to defend itself, but is taking criticism about the amplitude of that response. At least 181 Palestinians dead, including 52 children. The attack on the building that housed the Associated Press and Al Jazeera. Is the response disproportionate in your mind to these attacks from Hamas?
Well, first of all, it's a terrible tragedy what's going on, and the loss of life is just deplorable. Every rocket that Hamas sends into Israel is a deliberate effort to kill civilians, and I think we need to understand that. These rockets are indiscriminate and by definition designed to kill civilians. Israel has the right to defend itself, but has to use every effort to avoid civilian casualties. Now, I think they are trying, but nonetheless, the death toll increases, and the violence has got to stop. And I think we need to do everything possible to bring about a ceasefire. I think the administration needs to push harder on Israel and the Palestinian Authority to stop the violence, bring about a ceasefire, end these hostilities, and get back to a process of trying to resolve this long-standing conflict.
The Biden administration has sent an envoy to Israel and is working on trying to get the violence to cease. But what more can the administration do? What leverage do you think it can use with Israel?
Well, I think there just has to be sustained diplomatic engagement of the United States with our Palestinian partners, with our Israeli partners, with Egypt and other countries to try to bring about an end to this unspeakable loss of life. And I think that international effort, if sustained, will bring about that result. But we're going to have to speak out clearly about this. This has got to end. We can't have the targeting of buildings with press organizations. We can't continue to see this loss of civilian life. It's got to come to an end. And while I also want to say, while I fully defend Israel's right to defend itself. It needs to do what it needs to do to protect its people. I don't want that to be interpreted as support for Israeli settlement policy or the eviction of Palestinians from their homes. The Palestinian people have a right to live in peace and freedom, to a state of their own, living side by side in peace with Israel. And I think those points have to be underscored as well. But right now, the priority has to be ending the violence.
And we're back with the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff. Congressman, I want to jump to the issue of the Colonial Pipeline. What do you think was exposed by this ransomware attack in terms of our vulnerabilities?
Well, that our critical infrastructure is just not adequately protected. This is something that we knew before this attack, but now we can see so graphically. And I think it really calls upon the government to insist that a lot of this critical infrastructure that's in private hands be better protected. And if it means the government is going to have to set out minimum security standards, cybersecurity standards for private industry and critical infrastructure, then that's what we need to do. But we're all too vulnerable. I think the government is also going to have to go after these ransomware groups. And I think we're going to have to hold the host governments like Russia, China, and elsewhere responsible. And force them to indemnify against these attacks when they allow these criminal groups to operate on their soil.
When you say go after them, retaliate with attacks or try to prosecute them? What do you mean?
Well, I think we certainly ought to prosecute them when we can, although that's very difficult given where they're located. But I think we need to use our own cyber capabilities to go after their infrastructure, to cripple their ability to conduct more ransomware attacks, to deprive them of the resources that they gain by claiming ransoms and make their life very difficult. We have the capability to do these things. I think we need to utilize that capability.
In the minute we have left, there is sometimes called a blind spot between the intelligence agencies you work with and the corporations. How do we close that blind spot? How do they communicate in a way, one's public, one's private?
Well, we need to increase that collaboration. We've tried in the past, not very successfully. We need to make sure that the private industry feels comfortable sharing information with the government and vice versa while protecting people's privacy. But we also need to hold them accountable. Private industry needs to report to the government, and they need to report to their own customers when they've been the subject of cyber attack or hack, because it's individual privacy and data that's often being compromised. So there needs to be greater collaboration and a lot greater disclosure.
Okay. Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you so much for being with us on this exciting morning. We appreciate it. Thank you.